Can love turn deadly in the blink of an eye? Can a bond, once built on trust and intimacy, unravel into something unrecognizable, something dangerous? Do secrets, when buried too deeply, inevitably lead to tragedy? And what about same-sex relationships? Are they immune to the kind of violence we often hear about, or can they, too, be marked by destruction? Today, we explore a story that challenges all assumptions. A story of love, betrayal, and violence between two women whose lives collided in ways no one could have foreseen. On one hand, there was Lucretia Black, a vibrant 33-year-old woman who, by all appearances, had a promising future ahead of her. On the other, Teria Brown, a 42-year-old woman whose past and present seemed to intersect in ways that would forever change their destinies. What started as a love story ended in death. Within a matter of hours, both women were gone, one shot down at her own doorstep, the other dying in a dramatic police pursuit that spanned state lines. How did it come to this? What could drive someone to take a life, and ultimately lose their own in the process? This isn't just a case of crime, it's a case of human complexity. As we unravel their story, we'll dive into the lives they lived, the choices they made, and the deadly series of events that brought them to their final moments. Stay with me as we explore the chilling case of Lucretia Black and Teria Brown, a story where love didn't just hurt, it killed. Lucretia Black was only 33 years old, with her whole life seemingly ahead of her. Born and raised in a tight-knit community in Springfield Township, she was the kind of person people gravitated toward. Friends often described her as magnetic, a woman with a big heart and an even bigger smile. She had a way of making everyone feel seen, like they truly mattered. Growing up, Lucretia was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family often recalled how she would spend hours writing in her journals, dreaming of a future where she could inspire others. She wanted to build a life that mattered, one that reflected her passions and her drive to help others. After high school, she pursued a career in social work, dedicating herself to supporting women and children in crisis. For Lucretia, it wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Her friends often said she was a mix of ambition and compassion. She was outgoing and lively, the life of every gathering. But beneath her laughter was a woman who valued deep, meaningful connections. Her closest friends knew that Lucretia had high standards for the people she let into her life. She wasn't one to settle. And then, there was Teria Brown. The two met at a mutual friend's birthday party, a chance encounter that quickly turned into something more. Teria was 42, almost a decade older than Lucretia. She exuded confidence and carried an air of mystery that Lucretia found intriguing. Their conversations that night flowed effortlessly, and by the end of the evening, phone numbers were exchanged. What started as friendly texts quickly blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Teria had a way of making Lucretia feel special, showering her with attention and affection. In the early days, it seemed like love at first sight, an instant connection that felt too good to be true. Lucretia would often tell her friends how she had finally found someone who saw her for who she truly was. But love, as we know, can be complicated. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect relationship were gradual cracks, differences in priorities, unspoken insecurities, and moments that hinted at something more fragile than Lucretia was willing to admit. She was the type to believe in second chances, to see the good in people even when it wasn't always clear. And that belief would ultimately lead her down a path she never could have imagined. At 42 years old, Teria Brown was a woman who had seen her share of life's ups and downs. Born and raised in a neighboring town, she navigated a world that wasn't always kind or forgiving. Those who knew her described her as quiet and reserved, someone who kept her personal life close to the vest. But beneath that reserved exterior was a complexity that few truly understood. Before crossing paths with Lucretia Black, Teria had lived a life marked by both achievements and struggles. She had held steady jobs, proving herself to be reliable and hardworking. However, her personal relationships often told a different story. Friends from her past recalled that Teria had difficulty opening up, sometimes leading to misunderstandings and strained connections. There were whispers of past relationships that ended abruptly, though the reasons were seldom discussed openly. Psychologically, Teria was a private individual. Some acquaintances noted that she could be intensely focused, perhaps even obsessive when it came to things she cared about deeply. Whether this translated into controlling or jealous behavior in her relationships wasn't widely known, but it did raise questions in hindsight. When Teria and Lucretia met at that mutual friend's birthday party, it seemed like fate had brought them together. Despite their age difference, the two connected over shared interests and a mutual understanding of life's complexities. Their relationship began smoothly, filled with the excitement and hope that new love often brings. But as time went on, the dynamics between them began to shift. Close friends of Lucretia noticed gradual changes. She became less available, often canceling plans at the last minute. When asked, she would smile and say everything was fine, attributing it to a busy schedule or needing some downtime. Yet, there was an unspoken concern among those who cared about her. Some friends wondered if Teria was becoming overly protective or perhaps emotionally dependent. There were instances where Lucretia seemed hesitant to share details about her relationship, changing the subject when pressed. While no one could point to any specific red flags, the feeling that something wasn't quite right lingered in the background. Family members, too, sensed that Lucretia was carrying a weight she hadn't before. Conversations with her became shorter, and visits less frequent. Still, without concrete reasons to worry, those around her hoped it was just a phase, a natural ebb and flow of a new relationship finding its footing. Little did they know that beneath the surface, tensions were building. The complexities of Teria's personality and the pressures within their relationship were creating a situation that was increasingly volatile. What appeared to be a loving partnership from the outside was, in reality, far more complicated. As we continue to explore their story, we'll seek to understand what led to the tragic events that unfolded. Was there something in Teria's past that hinted at what was to come? Could the warning signs have been recognized before it was too late? The answers may not be easy to uncover, but they are essential to grasping the full scope of this heartbreaking tale. In the beginning, Lucretia Black and Teria Brown's relationship seemed like a story of passion and connection. They had different backgrounds, different life experiences, and even a significant age gap, but they found common ground in their shared dreams of building a future together. Yet, as with many relationships, the honeymoon phase didn't last forever. As the months passed, cracks began to form. Those who were close to Lucretia noticed gradual changes in her demeanor. She no longer shared the same excitement when talking about her relationship, and her once frequent social outings became rare. Conversations with her friends often ended with vague reassurances that everything was fine, even when her tone suggested otherwise. Behind closed doors, the dynamics between the two women grew more strained. Teria's intense personality, once seen as endearing, began to feel overwhelming. She would often question Lucretia's whereabouts, expressing doubts about her fidelity. The once easy flow of their conversations was replaced with interrogations, gradual accusations, and moments of uncomfortable silence. Friends later revealed that Teria's jealousy was palpable. She wanted to be the center of Lucretia's world, and any deviation from that created tension. Lucretia, on the other hand, had always valued her independence. She was a social butterfly, someone who thrived on maintaining her own identity outside of the relationship. But Teria's growing need for control began to erode that. There were disagreements over seemingly trivial matters, missed phone calls, social media interactions, or even innocent encounters with old friends. Each disagreement seemed to escalate a little further than the last. Over time, these arguments evolved into full-blown fights. Neighbors occasionally overheard raised voices coming from their home, though the exact details of the disputes remained unclear. Lucretia's close friends and family sensed the increasing tension but struggled to get her to open up. She would brush off their concerns, insisting it was just normal relationship struggles. Then came the whispers of betrayal. Teria's insecurities led her to believe that Lucretia was seeing someone else. Whether these suspicions were based on reality or merely a manifestation of Teria's growing paranoia remains uncertain. What is clear is that these accusations became a frequent source of conflict. Teria's relentless questioning and confrontations wore down Lucretia's patience, creating a rift between them that grew wider with each passing day. In the days leading up to that fateful Monday morning, the tension reached a boiling point. According to sources, the couple had an intense argument over the weekend, a fight that was reportedly louder and more volatile than anything they had experienced before. Neighbors described hearing doors slamming, followed by an eerie silence. Monday morning arrived with a chilling calm. Lucretia was at home, perhaps trying to gather her thoughts or find a moment of peace after the weekend's turmoil. But that peace would be short-lived. Teria, consumed by anger and frustration, arrived at the house with a weapon. What exactly triggered her actions that morning is still unclear, but the outcome was undeniable. Multiple gunshots rang out, shattering the quiet of Lincoln Avenue. By the time neighbors and first responders reached the scene, it was already too late. The warning signs had been there: jealousy, control issues, escalating arguments, but no one could have predicted the horrifying conclusion to their story. What led Teria to such a violent act? Was it a single moment of rage, or the culmination of months of unresolved tension? These questions remain at the heart of this tragic tale, and as we continue to uncover the details, we'll attempt to piece together the events that led to such devastating consequences. Some neighbors froze in their tracks, others called 911 immediately, their hands trembling as they described what they'd heard. When police arrived, the scene was grim. Lucretia lay just outside her front door, her body motionless, multiple gunshot wounds staining her clothing with blood. She had managed to stumble out of the house in a desperate attempt to escape, only to collapse on the very steps where she once greeted friends and family. The officers who first approached her checked for a pulse, but it was too late. Lucretia Black, a woman known for her warmth and kindness, was gone. The emotional toll on the community was immediate. Neighbors who had known Lucretia for years stood in shock, some weeping openly as they watched from behind police tape. "She didn't deserve this," one neighbor said through tears. Others gathered in small clusters, whispering in disbelief, trying to make sense of the horror that had just unfolded. Meanwhile, Teria Brown was nowhere to be found. As the realization set in that she had fled the scene, law enforcement quickly disseminated her description to surrounding agencies. A statewide alert was issued, her vehicle make and license plate number shared with every patrol car on the road. Detectives began piecing together what little information they had. Teria had left in a rush, taking only her car and the weapon she'd used in the crime. Hours later, a breakthrough came when Teria's car was spotted crossing into Clinton County, Indiana. What followed was a high-speed pursuit that played out like a scene from a movie. Teria weaved through traffic, pushing her vehicle to its limits, determined to avoid capture at any cost. Law enforcement stayed close behind, their sirens wailing as they tracked her movements down the interstate. The chase came to a dramatic end at a gas station near the State Road 28 exit. There, cornered and out of options, Teria's car screeched to a halt. Witnesses reported hearing a single gunshot from inside her vehicle, followed by an eruption of gunfire as law enforcement responded. The chaos was over in moments, but the aftermath was just beginning. When the dust settled, Teria was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators worked quickly to piece together what had happened during those final moments. Did Teria fire the first shot? Was it an act of defiance, or had she decided to end her own life rather than face justice? These questions remain unanswered. For the residents of Lincoln Avenue, Monday morning marked the end of an era. The loss of Lucretia Black left a void that could never be filled. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a wound to the entire community, one that would take years to heal. And Teria's flight and ultimate demise added yet another layer of heartbreak to an already devastating story, a tale of love, betrayal, and violence that left 2 lives destroyed and countless others shattered in its wake. The investigation into Lucretia Black's murder began the moment police arrived on Lincoln Avenue. Officers carefully secured the scene, ensuring every piece of evidence was preserved. Yellow tape cordoned off the house as forensic teams moved in, their gloves snapping on, their tools ready to uncover the story the scene was waiting to tell. The front door of Lucretia's home bore the marks of violence. Bullet holes punctuated its frame, each one a chilling reminder of the events that unfolded just hours earlier. Blood spattered the steps where Lucretia collapsed, and the trail leading from inside the house hinted at her desperate attempt to escape. Inside, investigators found further signs of struggle: overturned furniture, broken glass, and scattered belongings that painted a picture of chaos and fear. The murder weapon, a handgun later recovered in Terria's vehicle after the high-speed chase, became a key piece of evidence. Ballistics tests confirmed it as the firearm used in the crime, its cold steel carrying the weight of 2 lives now lost. Detectives also uncovered a chilling detail: Teria had purchased the weapon just weeks before the incident, suggesting a level of premeditation that sent shockwaves through those following the case. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they combed through text messages, emails, and phone records between the 2 women. These digital footprints revealed a relationship that had soured over time, filled with arguments, accusations, and moments of reconciliation that seemed to delay the inevitable. Motive analysis pointed to Terria's growing jealousy and fear of losing Lucretia, a toxic mix of emotions that culminated in the violence of that Monday morning. The reactions from Lucretia's family were understandably heart-wrenching. Her mother, speaking through tears, described her daughter as a light in this world, taken too soon. Other family members shared stories of Lucretia's kindness and resilience, painting a picture of a woman who had so much more to give. Her friends, many of whom had worried about her relationship with Teria, expressed feelings of guilt and helplessness, questioning if they could have done more to intervene. The community, too, felt the weight of Lucretia's loss. Lincoln Avenue, once a quiet and peaceful street, became the site of a makeshift memorial. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes filled the steps where she had taken her last breath. Neighbors gathered for a candlelight vigil, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of flickering flames. They prayed not only for Lucretia but for healing and understanding in the wake of such a senseless tragedy. News of the crime quickly spread beyond Springfield Township. Local media were the first to report the shocking details: a woman gunned down on her doorstep, her partner fleeing in a high-speed chase that ended in another death. But it didn't take long for national outlets to pick up the story. Headlines painted a dramatic picture: deadly love triangle, fatal jealousy, and tragedy in Springfield Township. News anchors recounted the events with solemn tones, their words accompanied by photos of Lucretia smiling brightly and Terria's cold, unsmiling mugshot. For some, the media coverage brought a sense of justice, ensuring that Lucretia's story wouldn't be forgotten. But for others, it was a painful reminder of what had been lost. The constant replaying of events, the speculation about motives, and the dissecting of their relationship left many in the community feeling raw and exposed. As the investigation progressed, the narrative became clearer, but the questions lingered. Could anything have been done to prevent this? Were the warning signs missed, or was this an outcome no one could have stopped? For the detectives, the case was solved, but for Lucretia's family and friends, the aftermath was just beginning: a lifetime of mourning, reflection, and the search for answers in the wake of an unthinkable tragedy. As investigators delved deeper into the tragic events on Lincoln Avenue, the question that lingered was, why? What could drive someone to commit such a horrific act against the person they once claimed to love? To answer this, we must step into the mind of Teria Brown and explore the psychological forces that may have fueled her actions. Teria was described by those who knew her as reserved, even guarded. Her reluctance to let others in might have been a reflection of past hurts, relationships that left her questioning her worth and fearing abandonment. But these traits, while gradual at first, began to manifest in ways that hinted at deeper issues. Jealousy, insecurity, and a growing obsession with control seemed to shape her behavior as her relationship with Lucretia progressed. For Teria, Lucretia's independence may have felt like a threat. While Lucretia thrived in her social circles and career, Teria's life seemed to orbit around their relationship. The imbalance was striking. Friends of Lucretia noticed Teria's constant need for reassurance, her probing questions about where Lucretia had been and who she'd spoken to. These weren't innocent inquiries, they were signs of a possessiveness that grew more consuming over time. As tensions mounted, Teria's insecurities turned to suspicions. Did she believe Lucretia was unfaithful, or was this a narrative born from her own paranoia? Jealousy is a powerful force, one that can distort reality and fuel irrational behavior. In Taria's mind, the idea of losing Lucretia became unbearable. Rather than addressing these fears constructively, they festered, creating a dangerous storm of emotions that culminated in tragedy. Was this a crime of passion, an impulsive act driven by an uncontrollable surge of anger and despair? Or was it something more chilling, premeditated, calculated, and planned? The evidence offers a glimpse into Taria's mindset. The gun, purchased weeks before the shooting, suggests that she had considered this path long before their final argument. But even with that preparation, the actual moment of violence seems to stem from an emotional breaking point, a confluence of jealousy, fear, and rage. When examining Taria and Lucretia's relationship, it's impossible to ignore the parallels to other cases of domestic violence. While society often focuses on heterosexual couples in these discussions, same-sex relationships are not immune to the dynamics of control, manipulation, and abuse. Research shows that domestic violence can manifest in any relationship, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, and jealousy is often a common denominator. Taria's actions fit the troubling patterns seen in similar cases. An intense need for control, coupled with escalating emotional volatility, created an environment where conflict could easily spiral into violence. What makes this case particularly devastating is the loss of two lives: Lucretia, the victim of a senseless act, and Taria, who allowed her insecurities to consume her completely. This wasn't just a story about love gone wrong, it was about the darker side of human relationships, where fear and possessiveness overpower trust and respect. Taria's inability to cope with her emotions, combined with her unwillingness to seek help or step away from the relationship, led to an outcome that shocked an entire community. As we continue to explore the details of this case, one question remains: could this tragedy have been prevented? Understanding the psychological underpinnings of domestic violence is a crucial step in identifying warning signs and offering support to those who need it most. In the end, this story isn't just about what happened, it's about what we can learn to ensure it never happens again. The story of Lucretia Black and Taria Brown shines a light on an often overlooked issue: domestic violence within LGBTQ+ relationships. While much of the conversation surrounding domestic violence focuses on heterosexual couples, studies show that LGBTQ+ individuals face abuse at rates comparable to, if not higher than, their heterosexual counterparts. According to the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, more than 40% of LGBTQ+ adults report experiencing intimate partner violence at some point in their lives. Yet, the stigma and unique challenges faced by LGBTQ+ victims often leave their stories unheard, their struggles invisible. In many cases, the abuse in LGBTQ+ relationships goes unreported due to fear of discrimination, judgment, or a lack of resources tailored to their needs. Taria and Lucretia's relationship reflects patterns of control, jealousy, and emotional dependency that often escalate to physical violence. For victims in same-sex relationships, breaking free can feel even more isolating, with fewer avenues for support and societal biases compounding their challenges. The lessons here are clear but deeply sobering. Recognizing the warning signs of an abusive relationship, whether it's emotional manipulation, excessive jealousy, or attempts to isolate a partner, is critical. Abuse doesn't always start with physical violence, it often begins with control, escalating slowly until the victim feels trapped. As a society, we need to do more. Education about domestic violence must include the LGBTQ+ community, ensuring that victims know they are not alone. Support networks, shelters, and resources need to be inclusive and welcoming, eliminating the barriers that keep so many victims silent. Perhaps, with greater awareness and more accessible help, tragedies like this one could be prevented. The story of Lucretia Black and Taria Brown is one of love, betrayal, and unimaginable loss. Two lives intertwined by passion and ultimately destroyed by fear and violence. Lucretia, a vibrant and compassionate woman, had so much more to give to her community and those who loved her. Taria, consumed by jealousy and insecurity, allowed her emotions to lead her down a path of no return. Could this tragedy have been prevented? It's a question that lingers in the hearts of those left behind. Were there moments where someone could have stepped in, where the warning signs could have been addressed? Or was this a collision of circumstances that no one could have foreseen? The lessons are painful but vital. Relationships, regardless of who they involve, should be built on trust, respect, and equality. When those elements are replaced with control, fear, and manipulation, the outcome is often devastating. As we close this chapter, I encourage you to reflect on the relationships in your life and the lives of those around you. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, know that help is available. There are resources, communities, and people ready to listen and support you. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a story that reminds us of the fragility of love and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to this channel. In future videos, we'll continue to uncover stories of love, betrayal, and resilience, stories that challenge us to see the humanity behind every headline. Until next time, stay safe, and take care of one another.